We asked Grok what the true purpose of the Roman dodecahedron actually is, and the honest answer is one that a lot of viral videos won't give you straight. Nobody knows. Not archaeologists, not historians, not the museums that display them. After nearly 300 years of study, nearly 200 archaeologists, historians, mathematicians, and dedicated amateurs have put forward more than 50 separate theories, and not a single one of them fully explains the evidence. That isn't a failure of research. It's a genuinely strange archaeological fact. And the honest version of this story, walking through what's actually been ruled out and what still remains standing, is more interesting than any single dramatic answer could be. The first Roman dodecahedron was discovered in 1739 in the English Midlands, a small, hollow bronze object about the size of a golf ball, with 12 flat pentagonal faces meeting at 20 corners, each corner capped with a small round knob. Every one of its 5-sided faces has a circular hole cut into it, and strangely, the holes aren't uniform. They vary in diameter from face to face on the same object, sometimes dramatically. Since that first discovery, more than 120 additional examples have been found, all across the northwestern provinces of the Roman Empire, in what's now England, France, Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands, dating from roughly the 2nd through the 4th centuries CE. And here's the detail that trips up nearly every theory anyone has ever proposed. Not one has ever been found in Rome itself, or anywhere in Italy, or anywhere in the empire's Mediterranean heartland. Despite being made using genuinely skilled bronze casting techniques by the most sophisticated engineering civilization of its era, these objects appear to be a purely regional phenomenon, confined to the empire's northwestern frontier provinces, an area that had been Celtic territory before Roman conquest, and remained culturally distinct from the Roman core even under imperial rule. That geographic pattern is the first serious clue working against most of the popular theories, because a genuinely useful, practical Roman tool, something used across the empire for surveying, calibration, or measurement, should show up in Roman military and administrative centers everywhere, not cluster exclusively in one cultural region on the empire's edge. And that regional clustering is exactly why the complete silence in the historical record is so strange. The Romans were prolific writers. Roman military engineers documented their tools and techniques. Roman merchants kept detailed inventories. Roman households left behind letters, receipts, and graffiti covering everything from gossip to grocery lists. And yet, across the entire surviving body of Roman literature, administrative records, and artwork, there's not one single mention of these objects, not one illustration, not one reference to what they were called or what they were used for. For something that required real skill and real bronze, a genuinely expensive material in the ancient world, to have left absolutely no trace in the written record is unusual enough on its own to make archaeologists suspicious of any theory claiming a purely practical, everyday function. Let's go through the theories that have actually been tested against the physical evidence and ruled out, because this is where the real archaeological detective work has happened. For decades, one of the most popular theories was that dodecahedrons served as military rangefinders, tools Roman legions used on the battlefield to calculate the distance to enemy formations or calibrate artillery, with the differently sized holes supposedly corresponding to standard angular measurements. It's a compelling idea, and it's been repeated in dozens of documentaries. It has never been demonstrated to actually work. Nobody has been able to show, using an actual dodecahedron replica, a reliable, repeatable method for using the object to measure distance or calibrate a weapon with any real precision. And if it were a genuine military instrument, you'd expect to find it concentrated at military sites and fortifications across the empire, not scattered across graves, coin hoards, and rubbish heaps in one specific region, which is exactly where most surviving examples have actually turned up. Similarly, the theory that they were used for surveying and construction leveling runs into a basic physical problem. The objects aren't standardized in size. Two dodecahedrons from the same region and the same century can differ significantly in their measurements, and a measuring instrument that isn't standardized against any consistent unit isn't functioning as a measuring instrument at all. The candle holder theory, another one that shows up constantly online, has a genuinely interesting origin, since a small number of recovered dodecahedrons do show trace residue of wax inside them. But archaeologists studying the objects closely have pointed out that this residue is far more likely to be a byproduct of how the object itself was manufactured, since ancient bronze casting frequently used a technique called lost wax casting, where a wax model of the object is built first, then coated in a mold and melted out before the bronze is poured in. Trace wax inside a bronze cast object from this era isn't unusual evidence of candle use. It may simply be leftover residue from how the object came into existence in the first place. And practically, many dodecahedrons have holes and proportions that would make holding a stable, safely burning candle awkward or impossible, which is a real problem for a theory built entirely around function. Then there's the recent theory that's actually gained serious traction among archaeologists in just the past few years, and it comes with a genuinely elegant piece of supporting logic. In 2023, a volunteer group called the Norton Disney History and Archaeology Group uncovered an exceptionally well-preserved example in Lincolnshire, England, one of the largest and most intact dodecahedrons ever found. What struck the team examining it wasn't just the object itself, but how it was made. The metal used was, in their own description, a difficult, sticky alloy to cast, requiring real skill and considerable time and effort to produce cleanly, and their example showed no wear marks at all, no scuffing, no scratches, none of the surface damage you'd expect from an object that was handled, carried, or used repeatedly as a tool. Their conclusion, one increasingly shared by other researchers studying the broader body of evidence, is that whatever these objects were for, mundane, everyday practicality, probably wasn't the point. Too much skill and material went into producing something that was never actually used for anything physical. That observation feeds into what's currently considered one of the more credible working theories, that dodecahedrons served a ritual, religious, or symbolic function rather than a practical one. Support for this comes from the archaeological context in which many examples have actually been recovered, not scattered. Randomly, but sometimes deliberately placed alongside other significant objects, in graves and coin hoards where valuable items were buried together, and in at least one case, carefully placed in a pit alongside 4th century Roman pottery in a way that suggests deliberate, meaningful deposit rather than accidental loss. Objects that get buried with the dead, or hidden away with genuine wealth, or placed with obvious intention rather than simply dropped and lost, tend to be objects that carried some kind of symbolic or spiritual weight to the people who owned them, whether as protective talismans, ritual objects tied to specific religious practice, or status symbols marking their owner as someone of particular means or standing. Alongside that, there's a genuinely charming and surprisingly well-supported theory that's gained real popularity in recent years, that these were tools for a specific fabric and metalworking. Technique used to create woven metal chains, sometimes called Viking knitting or French knitting, a method for producing tubular cord or wire chain by wrapping thread or thin wire repeatedly around a set of pegs or points in a specific pattern. The varying hole sizes on different faces of a dodecahedron could plausibly correspond to producing different diameters of finished cord, and the technique is one that would have been genuinely useful for creating jewelry, decorative cord, or the kind of fine metal chain associated with wealth and craftsmanship in this specific historical period and region. It's a theory that fits the geographic clustering reasonably well, and it has practical demonstrations behind it showing the technique actually works using a dodecahedron-shaped tool, which is more than most of the other theories can claim. It still doesn't explain everything, including why an object built for a specific practical craft technique would sometimes be buried in graves as if it carried deep personal or spiritual significance, rather than simply being a tool of the trade. The honest state of this mystery, and it's genuinely a mystery in the strict sense, meaning multiple serious, competing explanations exist, and none of them can be conclusively ruled in or out with current evidence, is that the truth may well be some combination of these theories rather than a single clean answer. An object could plausibly have started as a practical tool for a specific craft and gradually accumulated symbolic or status significance over generations of use in a specific cultural region, eventually becoming valuable enough and meaningful enough to be buried with its owner or hidden away with a hoard of coins, regardless of whether anyone by that point still remembered or cared about its original practical function. That kind of drift from tool to treasured object to symbol is a well-documented pattern in how ancient objects across many different cultures have evolved in meaning over time, and it would also neatly explain why these objects show up in such wildly different contexts, some clearly ritual, some clearly economic, with no single unifying pattern connecting all of them. What makes this such a satisfying mystery to actually sit with, rather than a frustrating one, is that it hasn't been solved by any single dramatic discovery, and probably won't be solved that way. Each new dodecahedron that gets pulled out of the ground, and new ones are still being found, the most recent major example. In 2023, adds one more data point, one more piece of context about exactly where it was placed, how it was made, whether it shows where, what it was buried alongside, that either strengthens or weakens one of the competing theories just slightly. Archaeology, when it's being honest with itself, often looks less like a single breakthrough discovery and more like this. A slow accumulation of small, careful observations that gradually narrow down what's possible, even when a single, complete, satisfying answer never quite arrives. The Roman dodecahedron has been sitting in museum cases and archaeological reports for nearly 300 years now. One of the genuinely rare artifacts from a civilization that documented almost everything about itself, and still nobody who made these objects ever bothered or ever needed to write down what they were actually for. Now, on the Tesla one, I need to flag something before writing it. I searched, and before she died, Nikola Tesla's assistant revealed what they truly discovered that night isn't based on any real historical account. It matches an existing AI-generated video with the identical title from late 2025, and there's no documented Tesla assistant deathbed confession or secret that night event in any biography, archive, or historical record. Tesla did have real assistants, most notably his secretary, Dorothy Scarrett, who left behind genuine, quotable recollections of working with him. And there's a real, well-documented story about what actually happened to Tesla's papers and lab notes after his death in 1943, including the FBI's seizure of his effects, which remains a legitimately interesting subject with real archival gaps. I'd rather build the script around the true version of that story than invent a fictional deathbed confession as if it were real, since presenting fabricated history as documentary fact isn't something I can do, even reframed through an AI-revealed hook, the way we did with the Grok scripts. If you'd like, I can write a script on Tesla's actual missing papers and the real mystery around his final years at Wardenclyffe and the Hotel New Yorker. That's genuinely strange and well documented. Want me to go ahead with that angle?